Hello and welcome back. My name is Joe Cass. I'm a senior director here at S&P Global Ratings and the host and creator of the Fixed Income in 15 podcast. So on this episode, we have Robert F. Smith, founder, chairman and CEO of Vista Equity Partners, and Doug Peterson, CEO and president of S&P Global, with both guests knowing each other via their work at Carnegie Hall. But a quick reminder before we start that the views of the external guests are their views alone and they do not represent the views of S&P Global. Okay, Robert and Doug, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Robert, to get us started, so Vista Equity Partners has a really kind of unique approach to software and technology investments. Can you share the story of the evolution of your firm and what you've built it into today?
Sure. Thank you. And again, thank you for inviting me to spend some time with you and my good friend, Doug. I think, again, Vista, shares a pathway that is, frankly, parallels the pathway of compute and computing in the U.S. and now globally. In the early days, we, as an engineer, were implementing, computing systems into process industries, really looking to enhance the control dynamic of these process industries. And it led to, massive productivity into those industries. And then as compute became more affordable, in other words, Moore's law kicked in and we were able to push computing power into the corporate environment. It started to give that same sort of productivity dynamic into the corporations. In Vista, just to give you a sense today, we own 87 software companies or so, and we test and measure the productivity of the return on investment of the products that we sell to our customers, and it still has a return of investment at over 640%. And so there's just frankly very little investment that you can make in a corporation that gives you that sort of return other than enterprise software. And so, in the early days of Vista, of course, the way that enterprise software was delivered, it was through on-premise based solutions, LAN type solutions. That was kind of phase one. And in that phase one, we really focused on how do you make the client server environment more productive? The types of architecture and products that were built and delivered to the consumer base. And they were, modestly growing type enterprises, and you could make them actually pretty profitable. So from an investment perspective, think about it was an ideal environment for buyouts and leverage buyouts. Well, once compute got to be a lot more, I'll call it ubiquitous and affordable and pushed into these super scalers, then we were able to move into cloud native environments, public clouds. And from that perspective, you saw a massive expansion in not only the revenue growth of those businesses, but frankly, the number of enterprise software companies. And so we pivoted as Vista, looking for more of these, we call them growth at scale type companies. In fact, our average company was growing at twice the level of, the early days of Vista. And, today, I'd completed well over 620 transactions in that 23 years. And really since, 2014, 2015, we pivoted and really started to look for cloud native, or in some cases hybrid type cloud environments. And you could actually drive those companies to a higher level of growth and more profitability at the same time versus, the early days. You didn't have necessarily the growth rates, but those leverage buyouts, and you were really focused on the profitability. So, the evolution of Vista has continued to track the proliferation of enterprise cloud computing or of computing in the enterprise, and then ultimately cloud computing. And now, of course, we're entering into a new phase, GenAI. GenAI is going to create yet another, call it catalytic event in the world of enterprise software, creating even faster enhancements in products and solutions and services to the customer bases that we serve, and more productivity in how you produce these products. So it continues to be a quite interesting and dynamic industry that still leads to a tremendous amount of productivity and value creation for those who consume enterprise software.
Great. Thanks, Robert. And Doug, S&P Global has got a long history of evolution and innovations. So over the last few years, you've led the company through a number of acquisitions, including the merger with IHS Markit. What is your strategic vision that has driven those transactions?
Well, Joe, thank you for inviting me today, and it's fantastic to be on this show with Robert. So, Robert, it's great to see you as well. Taking a step back at S&P Global, we have a unifying vision that's called powering global markets. This means that what we do, what we provide, benchmarks, pricing, research, news, analytics, gets embedded in people's workflow because they need that to make decisions, informed decisions. About 6 years ago, we took a step back and we took about 40 people and we put together a project Envision. And we went out and met 180 clients, regulators, policymakers, and asked them, what do you need in your world to make better informed decisions? And at that time, we heard some themes related to actually what Robert was just talking about, technology and the shifting, how technology is being used. And in fact, at that point in time, we did the acquisition of Kensho, which is an artificial intelligence center of excellence. We also heard from our clients, they wanted to think about how do we use your products and use your technology, which put us on a path to continuously upgrading how we interface with our clients. But when it came to scale of products, services, and data, we knew we wanted to grow in a few areas, sustainability, climate, the shifting capital markets and the kind of data you needed. And we found that IHS Markit across the board had these complementary data sets and products would allow us to grow. And so we approached IHS Markit a little bit over 3 years ago, and we ended up doing a deal which has really turned out to be fantastic. We're ahead of all of our projections on synergies, on cost synergies, on revenue synergies. We've got a new culture, and this has allowed us to get back to that unifying vision of powering global markets.
Great. Thanks, Doug. Robert, looking back, I guess, on 2023 at Vista Equity Partners and private equity in general, could you provide a couple of insights into your experience and maybe offer a glimpse into your expectations and maybe your vision for 2024?
Sure. I think, the world of enterprise software, I have to begin the framing of it really in the early 2000s. These companies that produce this massive productivity gain for, corporations globally. And I'd like to say enterprise software is the most productive tool introduced in the business environment of the last 50 years, likely will be for the next 50. And these companies traded really, around the, 2 to 4 times revenue type levels for really a decade and a half. And then, of course, the introduction of the cloud and cloud computing. And so then you had a re-rating of software. They went from kind of 2 to 4 times to about 6 times because you had the ability to deliver software much more efficiently and have it consumed much more efficiently by the customer base. And that productivity was being realized through companies becoming more profitable as customers or being able to reach their customers more efficiently. And so you saw a pretty, call it effective market and, in equilibrium from 2013, 2018, 2019. And then we entered into this global monetary expansion phase where you saw a massive increase in the asset, call it, values of these businesses. They weren't necessarily growing much faster, but, you saw because of this monetary policy, the 6 times multiple trading up to as high as, 18. So 3 times evaluation, you can call it 2019 up through 2021. Well, of course, through this monetary tightening, which is where we are today, you saw those multiples come back down. And so now they're trading more towards that historical average at about 6 times. So that's been the cycle that we have witnessed and experienced. And, for many investors who have felt that whipsaw, they are in some cases now saying, well, how am I going to return, how they're returning capital? We've been fortunate that we take an approach to build fundamental, call it infrastructure in our businesses. So we've been able to exit even in this environment back since November 2021, where there's been the downturn in the market. We've had 19 monetization events and, continuing to invest at a quite rapid clip today. In that period of time, about $15 billion invested in the lower 16 plus billion returned in that period of time. It's our same sort of rates of return. And that's because we've been able to build again, and install it, and what I call accelerate the corporate maturity of the businesses that we'd like to invest in. And we didn't really participate during that massive, inflationary environment in buying companies. And so I think, in the state today, it is a great time for us in our investing approach with, plenty of dry powder to continue to invest in these mission critical, business critical enterprise software companies. And Doug spoke to this a few minutes ago, who actually have a tremendous amount of data. And call it, having sovereignty and dominion over that data enables you to utilize tools like GenAI to create new products and solutions and services to sell to your customers. And and utilizing, code assist type of applications in your own portfolio companies enables us to get 10 now and 35% productivity. So when I look at the market going ahead, given, call it the stickiness of inflation, we're seeing some fall off the numbers in durable goods, but the services inflation numbers still seem to be pretty high. And some commodity inflation numbers seem pretty high and sticky, that I think we're going to actually have a pretty good investing environment, probably one of the better that I've seen over the last 20 years, given that massive monetary expansion, inflation activity that occurred in 2019, 2020, and going into the early part of 2021. So a great outlook from that perspective. And I think, investors who are looking to create, like us, create fundamental value in their businesses. And just as Doug had talked to, realigning cultures of businesses, implementing changes that create scalable infrastructure. Those are the sorts of businesses that would do very well in this next cycle of investing and returning value to stakeholders.
Great, thanks, Robert. Doug, you regularly meet with world leaders, CEOs, policymakers, including, I understand, recently meeting with the Prime Minister of Japan. So I'd be interested to know, what are your reflections on these conversations? What are you generally kind of hearing from senior individuals and these institutions?
Well, following on what Robert just mentioned, one of the most important topics that we discuss no matter who I'm with is what's going to happen with the global economy. People are wondering about, when are interest rates going to top out? Will there be continued interest rate increases in Europe, in the UK, in Japan, in the US? And then when will interest rates turn around and move the other direction? The bond markets have been moving around, expecting there will be some sort of decreases through 2024. But it seems like the policymakers are still evaluating very cautiously what's happening in the real economy. The next theme that we talked about pretty much every meeting I go to, and it was featured extensively in UN General Assembly Week and Climate Week in New York, was sustainability and what's happening with climate change. COP has taken place recently. We've seen that there's a lot of discussion about the long-term trends towards net zero, how that's going to happen. And very importantly, because of the world we're in, financial markets will play a critical role in being able to achieve net zero, because there's a need for infrastructure, for all types of investment to be able to come up with a sustainable economy. And so we're also very engaged in that. Related to my discussions in Japan, including with the Prime Minister, Japan is going through their own transition. And we talked about a lot of topics, including sustainability and energy transition. We talked about what's happening with interest rates, with economic growth, but there are a couple of other topics, and they actually relate to some of the areas that Robert works in. The first was the entire digital economy and what's happening with digital transformation. And in Japan, that also includes semiconductors and software, something that aligns very well with the United States' own interest. And then the other area is healthcare, health tech, what's happening with healthcare devices, with life sciences. These are areas that between the US and Japan, there's a lot of interest to work together. And these were really good, real good dialogue I had in Japan. And I enjoy these conversations. They also help shape the strategy of S&P Global.
Great. Thanks, Doug. Robert, interesting one for you. What view or opinion from technology or entrepreneurship do you believe to be true that few others would agree with you on?
That's a good question. There's one topic that has come forward. I don't know about a few others would agree with me on, but I continue to look. Enterprise software, the productivity that it has brought to, frankly, the global call it business ecosystem, has just had a profound effect on pretty much every developed economy on the planet. And some are saying that they believe that software is going to become obsolete. I don't believe that at all. Obsolete as a result of the emergence of generative AI. From my perspective, I think again, generative AI will be yet another catalyst that's going to create some more short-term advantages for some, disadvantages for other. But I believe this is actually going to play out in three waves, and we're seeing the early part of it now. The first wave, of course, is value of this technology, and this technology shift is going to inure to the benefit of the hardware providers, and you're seeing that today. And it's going to see massive amount of capital being poured into the development of GPUs and TPU environments. That you'll see investors putting capital in and governments putting capital in, looking to create forms of strategic advantage going forward. The second wave will endure basically to the benefit of the superscalers, those who are providing these cloud-based infrastructures, and then what will be GPU infrastructures, and ultimately there'll be large corporations that will gain access to that capacity where they can now use that to innovate in products and solutions and services. But ultimately, I believe the third wave will inure to the benefit of those who are utilizing that capacity and be very effective in creating specific products and solutions and services to sell into their markets. And that sets itself up quite well for software companies and enterprise software companies in particular. One of the advantages of being a company like S&P and Vista and others is you have data and workflows that others don't have access to. And if you maintain, I call it the sovereignty and dominion of it, you should be able to implement various large language models to utilize that data and those workflows to create an enhanced product innovation, services innovations, product uplift, some portfolio enablement, and ultimately decreasing your cost of delivery. Part of the way we do it is leveraging the size and scope and scale of our infrastructure so that we are are participants and partners with these superscalers and having the ability to utilize those relationships to gain access and innovate. In fact, we hold our own hackathons with our own companies. We've had 2 this year with well over 300 participants, 40 companies, to use certain of our companies like Avalar, to use AI to automate compliance processes and create conversational experiences with customers, or PowerSchool, which is building AI products that create customized homework solutions for each student. And some may find that to be controversial on the one hand, but I think it will enhance the educational opportunities and business opportunities, and frankly accelerate those opportunities for our customer base, which will lead to an overall GDP pickup globally. And I think just ensuring that there's, call it, responsible management of how GenAI is used in environments, corporate environments in particular, will lead to, I think, a massive productivity increase for all stakeholders in those ecosystems.
Great. Thanks, Robert. Doug, you've been an advocate for the role of data and analytics in decision making. Can you tell us about maybe a specific instance where data-driven insights has had a profound impact on your career?
Well, I think about data insights as something that's been throughout my entire career, whether it was as a banker, thinking about credit decisions, as a manager, making investment decisions. Now at S&P Global, with the amount of data we have, which is going to be critical to what Robert just talked about, the generative AI and large language models. But I started my career in data. I was a math and history major, and my first job was as a research analyst, basically a data scientist, building models for the oil industry to determine what were the key factors that would lead to the price of a barrel of oil. We had to extract data from multiple sources. We had to actually put it into punch cards. I'm aging myself. And we had to then build models. And one of the things I had to do was build the models themselves and then build the actual spreadsheets and the outputs. There's no such thing as Excel or PowerPoint at the time. I used to have to build the models themselves that would come out in batch process overnight. And one story I'm going to tell you that sounds a little bit crazy, but one time I sent out the batch processing overnight. I thought I'd get 4 pages back the next day. I got 4 boxes of paper, and I had built an infinite loop into my program, and it never stopped printing. And they eventually had to shut down the print center because they were going to be printing all night for me. And I only thought I was getting 4 pages. But anyway, I learned a lot. That was one of the lessons learned over the years. Don't build infinite loops into programs. But data's here to stay. Fortunately, it's something that is fantastic at S&P Global, and this is going to be the future of technology, AI. It's all going to revolve around data.
Fantastic. Thanks, Doug. Robert, could you share some insights and maybe stories into your personal leadership style and how it's influenced the culture and also the success of Vista Equity Partners?
Yeah, sure. Our culture is really founded on what I call an engineering mindset. Like Doug, I was a scientist, engineer, I was a chemical engineer, and we really focus on building processes, hopefully not infinite loops, but feedback and feed forward processes that give us the ability to continue to tune our approach to the market. We have a strong commitment to excellence, and as I tell my team, while we're not perfect, we work really, really hard to be really, really good at a lot of things. We like to refine and take data and information and refine our our engagements. Again, having done now over 600 plus transactions, you learn something every time, and you want to make sure that you can build that into your operations. Either it's in your underwriting or your value creation, or your go to market in the companies, or these best practices that we've honed and developed. The mindset is that it's an engineering mindset. I call it commitment to excellence, and frankly, commitment to diversity. We think about opening the aperture for ideas. Our world now has become much more interconnected. There are some elements of our world that are decoupling in some cases at some level or another. But the consumer base in the world continues to expand and continues to be a lot more diverse. And we want to ensure that we have, in the way that we approach our business, the best thinking at the table. We do that through the programs at every level, from the board level. We've reached, been at gender parity at our Vista for a number of years now at the firm, and within our portfolio companies in terms of our board representation. 100% of our boards have at least one person of color, and I think we're part of what we're looking to do is just ensure that we have opened the aperture of knowledge, information, and tune our systems, and ensure that we have the ability to the best thinking globally. We're a global operation operating in 180 countries. I think we've got now 520 million users of our software. And so we have to build out institution that can frankly capture the best thinking, the best ideas, and build them into a process that we can then proliferate into the marketplace to enhance the benefits for our shareholders and stakeholders within the community of Vista.
Great. Thanks, Robert. Doug, the financial markets continue to rapidly evolve, really, from credit to equities to commodities. What are the biggest trends you see driving the markets of the future?
We've talked about a few of the trends, whether it's sustainability or AI, but let me talk specifically about the capital markets themselves. We have the deepest, most liquid capital markets in the United States, and it's a massive competitive advantage for us. And some other parts of the world have figured that out. But even in the US, the markets are not standing still, and there's four big trends that are taking place at different aspects of the timing. One is from active to passive. We see that in our own business with S&P Dow Jones indices. It's moving towards products which are easy to understand, they're transparent with low fees. Another big trend relates from public markets to private markets, and Robert's part of that transition. We see a large growth in private credit. We see banks moving from bank loans to private loans. We see the markets moving from bond markets and even to private markets. We see a massive change going on from this public to private, from banks to private sector, et cetera. The next big trend we see relates to broker to self-directed. There are a lot of clients, we're seeing it very quickly in Europe, where the consumer is not going anymore to a broker. They're starting to build their own portfolios. They're having a direct relationship with asset managers, not going through a third party. And that's starting in Europe, not the US, which is interesting. And then the fourth big trend I'd call was DeFi. It's using blockchain protocols for the financial markets, a whole new set of rails. I don't see anything right now that's totally disrupting the traditional financial markets, but there are some markets like repos that have started to use DeFi rails for the repo market. There's some things going on with trade. You have some central banks around the world doing CBDC, central bank digital currencies. So those are four big trends which are changing the capital markets. We're trying to stay on top of all of them because the markets are going to be very different 5 years from now than they are right now.
Thanks, Doug. Robert, there's now basically a famous viral clip of you giving a commencement address at Morehouse College, during which you let the class of 2019 know that your family are going to be making a grant of around $40 million to pay off the student loan debt of the entire graduating class. So what inspired this act of generosity, and what impact has it had on both the recipients and the broader education landscape?
Yeah, thank you for raising that. Again, that was a wonderful moment for me and the students, and it continues to pay dividends in many respects. My parents were both lifelong educators, school teachers in the public school system in Colorado, which is where I grew up. It was kind of interesting. My mother and father were very much involved in their community, and everything from my mother writing a check every month to the United Negro College Fund, to my father ensuring that he provided access and opportunity for kids in our neighborhood to get outdoor education and Head Start programs, which he was one of the leaders to ensure that was happening in our community. And as I was raised and thinking broadly, call it beyond our household. It was important to, as you get more capacity to help and aid people in communities that you care about, that you do so. And it's an important element and aspect of who we are as, frankly, as Americans, to be thoughtful about that. And in some cases, it's as simple as reading, making sure you spend time reading to some students who may not have someone who can read to them, or in some cases, it's, liberating, in this case, students of some student debt that can frankly be crippling to them and inhibit their ability to participate as business owners or homeowners earlier in their career. And, I have calls with these students once a month, the end of the month, since then. And, it's been a wonderful experience to hear how they've been able to, do everything from start their own companies to, I get the questions, okay, Mr. Smith, how do I go, raise money to expand my business? And I'm doing, renovations of houses. I need an $18,000 loan, and, helping them to understand how to use the banking system and create bank accounts and those sort of things. So others who are, looking to, create, investment funds. So, it has paid a lot of dividends, and I have guest speakers and invited speakers from time to time to also give perspectives. And I think we all, we've all been graced in some respects, and we're either on this call or this channel of broadcasting. You've had some measure of good fortune, and probably it's somewhere along the way. I know I can point to 2 or 3 mentors that made a huge difference in my life. Sometimes it was advice, sometimes it was an opportunity. I think a good part of being a fundamentally solid human being is to pay that forward. And so I like to and look to do that when I can at levels of scale that I think matter for, again, communities that I care about.
Great. It's fantastic. Thanks, Robert. So a question for both of you now. So you're both from the western part of the US, so Colorado and New Mexico. How have the places you're from shaped your approach, your style, or even your worldview? And Doug, I'll start with you.
Well, first of all, thank you for the question. But just going back a second, Robert, thank you for your philanthropy and your leadership in philanthropy in the community. It's absolutely incredible and something that all of us appreciate. And I hope that we can all lead at the same way you have. So thank you for that. Growing up in New Mexico was something that's very special. And anybody think that everything happens in the West Coast and East Coast is missing out. I grew up with a family in an environment where everything was about decency. It was about respect. It was about dignity. And that's something I've taken with me for the rest of my life. When I get back to Santa Fe every year, I feel like I'm back at home. And there's that environment of decency, of integrity that I mentioned. And it's just something I've taken with me everywhere I've gone. And I know that having parents who also went to college in Colorado, one was born there, I know that we have a similar culture with Colorado.
And I will tell you, and thank you, God, for all the work that you're doing philanthropically, individually, as well as through, the S&P 500 platform. I, think about our life and how I grew up in Northeast Denver. I was in a community that was filled with, hardworking folks from all walks of life. But again, it was in a time of segregation. My neighbors were, dentists and teachers and Pullman porters and contractors. And, I just, I always felt, like I say, as a part of a beloved community. I felt like I had everything I needed, and I could say, nothing I wanted, right? But what I had was people who cared about the kids in our community, and they cared in ways that they, when there was a young man who, really was into rocketry. This is the age of, Americans going into space, and he took 8 kids in our neighborhood, and and I did it at his own expense. Taught us how to shoot off rockets. He's asked us rockets. We build them, and I will tell you, of those 8 children, 6 of them became some students, STEM students of some point, engineers, or majored in some STEM curriculum. Some even got PhDs. And you think about those little experiences that showed to me the importance of caring about the community in which you lived in, and giving to that community in ways that meant, whatever you had learned at work or in school, that you would deliver to the children in that environment. And that was that, as you said, that sense of decency and that sense of community that has always permeated really my psyche in the way that I like to approach life. And Doug and I have that great opportunity to do some work together at Carnegie Hall, and part of what we do there is deliver music education programs and Wow Music Institute to students. We get over 600 1,000 students a year. And to me, bringing music education back into the classrooms is important. And Doug and I remember the days in the Midwest where we would listen to, as we talked about, that single earbud, tuning into whatever music was being broadcast, whatever you could pick up on your radio. And I remember going on Sundays in the summer, the Denver Symphony Orchestra would have a concert in the park, and it was a free concert. And being in a segregated environment, folks on my side of the park would walk over with their lawn chairs, and folks on the other side of the park who look different than us, would walk over with their lawn chairs. And you sit there in the summer afternoons and going into the evenings with, I call it, that smell of fresh grass and being cut, and listening to Beethoven or Bach or whatever they decided to play at that time. And you got to know people in your community, not necessarily your neighborhood, but in your community. And ultimately, when they desegregated the schools, you went to school with these folks. And I thought it just created just a wonderful experience. And look, no community is perfect, but I think music is one of the ways that brings people together and creates a harmonious set of experiences, and frankly, a better place to live. So I will continue to invest time and energy and effort along with Doug to ensure that happens in places that we are.
Fantastic. And Robert, you've kind of preempted my next question, where I was going to ask you about both of you really sharing this passion for music and the arts. Maybe Doug, you could answer, why do you think it's so important for people, especially young people, to be involved and experience the arts?
The arts are something that allows you to move into a different world. There's a level of creativity, of spontaneity that you can experience that allows you to open your mind to all types of experiences. I grew up listening to music, playing music, and it was something that also opened me up to whole new worlds of travel and other experiences. And I'm going to go back to a little bit to your last question. There's something that one of my grandfathers who spoke Spanish used to say, that cada cabeza es un mundo, which means every mind is a world. And I think investing in every mind and finding one of the ways to expand that mind through music and the arts is absolutely fantastic and worth investing in. There's a school in New Mexico which invests in the arts. It's called the New Mexico School of Arts. It brings kids from across the state who have experience and knowledge and a passion for the arts. But it puts them in a school where they also have to learn about English and math and science and get a full education, but gives them every tool they need to excel in the arts later on. And those are the kinds of programs that I really enjoy seeing. And I enjoy seeing young people embrace the arts and growing around it. And it's something I still do. I go to the arts. I was at a program this weekend. I'm going to be at another program the following weekend because it's something that gives me a lot of passion myself.
Fantastic. And Robert, before I move on to the last question, did you have any kind of final comment on the importance of the arts for young people?
Yeah, I always like to say I have the great, call it grace to be able to travel all around the world. And I found that there's two ways to really engage with others' cultures effectively. One is through food, and the second is through music. And I love them both. You can tell I love them both. And I think it's important, again, my father went to school on a band scholarship, and my house was always filled with music, and he played the organ and piano, and his twin sister played the organ and piano, and they would literally on the weekends play for hours at a time. And it brought us together as a family. And frankly, I think music continues to bring us together as humanity. And I'm just always fascinated, when you see, the instruments in the Middle East of the oud, which is similar to the Spanish guitar, and you see how it's played in jazz in New Orleans, and just how it's all connected. And you just feel this sense of humanity that just flows through music. And I think that's an important part of what we all should support as business leaders, is make sure that we haven't lost sight of our humanity as we continue to seek enhanced profits for our stakeholders, and improve the condition of again the communities that we represent and we care for. So it's an important part of what we do as leaders.
Fantastic. So Robert, down to the last question, and it goes to you. So typically on this podcast, I interview leaders, influential individuals from the world of finance and beyond, just like you and Doug. Thinking of everyone you've met, everyone you've worked with, who would be the most interesting potential guests I should ask to join a future episode of this podcast?
The most interesting, I don't know. There are a lot of people I get a chance to meet who are very interesting. But there's probably one that I think you should interview is a guy by the name of Bill Bynum. And Bill runs the City of Hope Credit Union. It's in the Delta, basically the Deep South. And when I think about people who make a difference, who are really unsung heroes, this is a credit union that, frankly, I think they had prior to, some of the this is a, digital enablement of that financial institution. They were doing 40 to 50 loans per year. And once they were able to really digitize their infrastructure, they are now able to deliver, and process 3,000 to 4,000 loans per year. And these loans are on average, 10, 11,000 that reach that community. And if I'm not mistaken, they still have a kind of a, lower default rate than the average FDIC insured bank. Helping, if you can, interview him and get an understanding of how the knowledge of this community and the community that has been starved of resources in utilizing technology to deliver financial resources to that community, the impact it has on the actual people and the businesses in that community is profound. And I'm just proud to have been able to help during the time of the early parts of COVID and PPP to ensure that we could get capital directed to those sorts of what they call CDFIs, and MDIs, minority depository institutions, to enable those communities to actually not only get through the pandemic, but digitize those infrastructures, so that creates a long-lasting economic opportunity that all Americans benefit from. So that'd be a person I think you should.
Great. I will put him on the list. Well, that's the end. Thank you so much to Robert and Doug for your time today. And for everyone watching and everyone listening, see you next time on Fixed Income in 15.